Hi, I'm with Badir Risk, the CEO of Paragon, and they're the Schneider Electric Sustainability Global Impact Winners. And I'm super excited to hear more about their project and what they're doing at Paragon. So, Badir, tell me a little bit about the concept of regenerative workspaces.
Thank you, Mike. Glad to be here. With what we do at Paragon and our understanding of how sustainability could be like taken further and how could we push the envelope when it comes to sustainability is by embodying the concept of regenerative workspace and in particular to the experiences that's created within that. What that means is basically is how do we care about like human-centric design as well as biodiversity of the ecosystem. So in terms of like things such as biophilic design, circular economy. So like how do we choose material that are doesn't have an end or like has a recycling element at the end of its life cycle and so forth. Then the second element that we think about and we care about in the regenerative workspace model is the well-being of the community that is within that space. So at the end of the day, the real estate that we build is basically for the people that are within that space. So how do we care about like their productivity? How do we care about like their well-being and health in terms of like the amount of daylight that comes in terms of the thermal comfort and so forth. Then the third element is our utilization of technology and innovation, because you can do one and two without technology and innovation. That's what embodies our relationship with Schneider Electric in terms of how we monitor our usage and B, control it and C, hopefully like automate a lot of that control. So for example, if you in a room with like a bigger number of people, then your occupancy sensor will automatically learn about how many people are in that room, and then therefore change, like either the amount of fresh air that comes in or the thermal degrees within the HVAC systems. And then finally, within our regenerative workspace model is the care about like the community itself, right? And how do we raise a community of innovation, and that we do that through things like our spaces, but also like our property technology accelerator PropTechs.
Yeah, it's amazing to hear what you're saying. It's really the convergence of technology, creating a really people-centric space, right? So that way people can really thrive in that environment, and the technology is enabling all of that. But tell me a little bit about the project itself. What kind of challenges did you experience doing this type of project?
Well, we have multiple challenges that we went through, but first, I think understanding what problem are we trying to solve, right? So, and I think in the real estate, specifically in the workspace, the understanding of the problem for the real estate developers isn't so clear, right? We come with an operating model plus the development, and therefore we try to identify exactly what we're trying to solve. So in that case, is how do we solve for a future generation of people who are going to work in a setup that we're unaware of, and that entails that we need to create massive flexibility component within either the design phase, but also like the implementation phase. So like in terms of the systems that we use within the facility. So that was one of the biggest challenges. Then the second one is with a lot of pressure on energy, utility, water, how do we optimize for this? Yep. And then third is how do we build a brand on top of that so that make it more understandable either to our tenants or to our investors.
That's really interesting. And so the flexibility is super important, but being future ready, having the technology there to withstand the needs of the occupants, the needs of the community, making sure that you have the ability to kind of grow and adapt to it. So that's really interesting. And I know you guys worked very closely with Schneider Electric, and we're really excited by this project. Can you tell me a little bit about the solution that you implemented from Schneider, and how did that contribute to the goals that you had for the project itself?
Yeah, well, great. We went to Schneider in 2020 during our design phase and said, hey, we want to develop one of the smartest IoT-driven buildings in Egypt, right? And that was like the brief, right? So like, this is what we want to do. How could we do it? So we leverage on like Schneider's global understanding, We've got inspired by Schneider's positioning in terms of like how they develop intensity and like and all the other projects across the world to bring in this innovation locally and build on top of it one of the best workspace developments in Egypt. So with Schneider, we were able to get like the EcoStruxure solution, so like in terms of like the infrastructure, and then on top of it the application layer, as well as transform how our building is operated and how we listen to the data within that development. By doing that, we were able to reduce our utility cost by 21%. But that's not what's interesting about it. It's what's interesting about it is that this 21% is compared to the ASHRAE standards, which is the global standards. Yep. However, when we did our local assessment, that was 70% compared to our previous developments, right? Because phenomenal. Yeah. Because imagine 70% savings in an economy where utility cost is increasing every year. Right, so in the Egyptian economy, there is a big subsidies towards utilities, and that subsidy is currently going under reform, and that means that electricity, water, and all other utilities are by definition increasing year over year. Right. So if today we have 70% cost reduction, that 70% is just like increasing over the years.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I think that's one of the measurable benefits that you have with this solution. And I think, tell me a little bit about some of the, not only the value and benefits, but like how are you guys measuring impact? So we're talking about impact and, impact makers, but what are the things that you guys look at as you're measuring the impact of what you're doing at Paragon, and especially within this project?
We have multiple elements that we look at, right? So like there's that technical part, which is our CO2 emissions. So we're saving about 1,000 tons on CO2 by what we have deployed in the project. But then there's also, like the cultural part, and we have KPIs in terms of how many people do we bring to our buildings that are non-tenants, how many types of culture events that we do, and like the impact that we have in terms of like inspiring and empowering other work communities. Like I said, we're very focused on technology and innovation, but we also understand like what role we play. Right. So like we have a lot of challenges that we want to solve along the time with external sources, and that's why we structure this property technology accelerator to help us solve our problems, and also as well as investing into future proof technologies.
Yeah, it's amazing, and you did this throughout the entire project lifecycle, and I think what's really interesting is that when you guys were designing and thinking about what you wanted to do, you had sustainability really at the core of that. Can you tell me what it means to kind of design for sustainability and thinking about that at the very start of the project and making that part of the foundation of who you are as company at Paragon, but also the project itself that's going to be now part of the community?
Yeah. Well, we started off with Paragon 1 at the first initiation of the project, where we didn't really think about that we want to make it sustainable. In terms of like we want to get a LEED certification for it. So we started off in the first 6 months during the design phase. We've started implementing a lot of the like the sustainability measures without having the framework of a LEED certification. And 6 months later, after the design phase was almost done, we hired our first sustainability consultant for that project, and we realized that we're already a LEED certified without having to do anything.
That's
right?
Amazing. So you guys are already ahead of the curve, already thinking about all the things you need to do, but not with the idea of getting to a certification.
Exactly, yeah. And that was really interesting because there's a lot of inspiration in the world that pushes you towards that, right? Yep. And it's like things like, we want to implement solar panels on the roof, right? So without having to think that we want to be LEED certified, that was already on our agenda, right? So once we already switched to the LEED certification program, which now all our developments are pre-LEED certified since we've our first learning, that enabled us to push the envelope forward and be like, we don't want to be LEED certified, we want to be LEED silver, and then be like, no, we want to be LEED gold. So like we kept just pushing the envelope. And in order for us to be able to do that, then you need to have the right partners in place in terms of multiple things. Not only Schneider, not only the technology component, but also glazing. How do you design the space? The electromechanical systems. So we've done that. And what we realized also is the sustainability journey doesn't stop at design or construction phase, but actually it starts with delivery.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
And so we have big ambitions that for the next 2 years, how could we double our savings just from an operational improvement and operational efficiency improvement.
That's great. And sustainability is not something that starts and stops. It's a journey. It starts with designing, the building, going through the operation phase, but it's constantly a journey, and it's something that we need to think about, and we need other people to think about it that way. So that way they're designing for, performance, but also thinking about it when they get into the actual operation and have people in the building. We've talked a few times in this project. I'm super excited by it. You are definitely super excited by it. But tell me really what excites you about just the project and regenerative workspaces?
Yeah. Last year we've done this project also that Schneider had a lot of, a big role to contribute to, which is a workspace facility on the beach. So we went to the north of Egypt on the Mediterranean Sea, built an office park with containers, so to be ultimately very sustainable and also have the flexibility to move those containers back. And so we built this facility on the beach, and while we're thinking about the project, we realized that workspace doesn't start and stop with the office space. Right. But actually there is multiple components that need to be around it to make it, exciting for people to go. Why would you go to the office today unless you have the different facilities? The beach was not enough, in our opinion, and therefore, I think the future of real estate is the services around it. And in that project in particular, we had the nursery once you walk into the project, and then we have an event space where there's we ran a lot of workshops, talks, and entrepreneurial pitches, and investor nights. Then there's a gym where we did sweat and swim exercises before we're going to work, as well as a restaurant and a coffee shop place. So in every single development that we do, we embody those components. So in every single workspace development that we do, we embody those components, and we think that this is where, the value creation that comes to the community is from.
Right.
And therefore, an increase of overall asset price.
I mean, it sounds amazing. It sounds really like a community that you've built. And it's something where, people that are going to work can really enjoy the space that they're in, but also enjoy all the things that are surrounding them. And for me, that's really how you start to balance life and live life and become people-centric. And that's a great story. And in fact, we'll talk about how to bring that to the U.S. at some point.
Yeah.
But is there anything else that you want to share about, what Paragon is doing and, just kind of giving, more context to you as a company and the importance that, or what you guys are providing in the Egyptian market?
Yeah. Well, today we're about 100 employees between Cairo and Riyadh, so Egypt and Saudi. And we're really hyper-focused on delivering value to the community who works. And if I want to summarize what we do, it's going to be Berlin meets Frankfurt. Or New York meets San Francisco, since we talked about the U.S., right?
Yeah.
So imagine how would that look like, right? So how would that casual, more forward thinking, innovative, breaking the rules with corporate structure, disciplined attitude would look like, right? How would we merge those? And I think the future for the next 20, 30 years is not really about one single side of those, but actually the combination of both of them. You need the capital, but you also need the innovation, and how could you merge between them? And I think what we're creating in Paragon is that place, right? Is this Berlin fusion with Frankfurt.
That's great. And I mean, the innovation that continues around the built environment to help decarbonize, create more sustainable places will obviously continue. We have so much of that technology today, and you guys are leveraging that technology. And it's great to see how it's actually driving impact for you in the community, and it's an inspiring story. So Badir, again, I want to thank you for joining me today, but it's always a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.